Capitol, room 430, and we're conducting this hearing by video conference as well. Welcome to everybody who's joining us. Today, we are going to be hearing a number of measures, and I welcome all of the testifiers who are here to testify on these measures. I would encourage you, when you're providing testimony, try to keep it to 2 or 3 minutes. And because we have to adjourn in time for session, if we run out of time, I may ask you to summarize or stand on your testimony, and I appreciate your kokua. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while you're waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. If you have any questions, any technical questions, please contact the IT staff, the technical staff, via the chat function on Zoom. Just use that for technical issues only, not for policy discussions. If you're disconnected unexpectedly, just try to rejoin us and I'll endeavor to make sure you can continue your testimony if you're in the middle of it. If for some reason the network fails and we have to reschedule, we'll post notice so that you will know when we're having our hearing and our decision making if we have to postpone it. And please conduct yourself with the finest tradition of aloha and courtesy to everybody else so that we can have a successful and productive hearing. Thank you very much again for being here, and let's go ahead and start. First bill is HB 1768, relating to the disposition of water rights, specifically exempting in-stream use of water for traditional and customary kalo cultivation practices from the existing process for disposition of water rights. First up, we have Department of Hawaiian Homelands with testimony in support.
Good morning, Chair Tarnes, Vice Chair Bronco. We do stand in strong support of this measure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for testifying. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Mr. Ian Hirokawa.
Good morning, Chair Tarnes, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Ian Hirokawa with DLNR Land Division. I will stand on our testimony supporting the intent of the measure and offering our comments, and will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have written testimony in support from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the County of Kauai. We have testimony in support from County Council member Dr. Holeka Inaba. Please proceed.
Aloha kakayaka, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members here testifying in support of this measure. Friends of ours are farmers in Waioli and are part of the hui who have helped to get them where they are in terms of the water rights and the water use that they're able to pull from today. And, you know, as representatives of the people, we're elected to make the right decisions even when no one's looking. And I hope that we can make the right decision on this measure today. Mahalo nui.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony in support from Michael Dahalig, County of Kauai Managing Director, from Jody Sayagusa, the Planning Department, Kevin Chang, Kua'aina Ulu Aumo, and from the Hanalei Watershed Hui, Maka'ala Ka'au Moana. And we have testimony in support from the Sierra Club of Hawaii, Wayne Tanaka. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnes, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Sierra Club will stand in its written testimony in strong support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony, written testimony in support from the Aloha Aina Legal Corp, or Legal Group, Shard Freitas. And we have testimony in support from Reed Yoshida, Waioli Valley Taro Hui. Please proceed. Dr. Kapua Sproat, pleasure to see you. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnes, Vice Chair Bronco, and honorable committee members. I'm Kapua Sproat. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Waioli Valley Taro Hui. We appeared before your commission last session on similar topics with concurrent resolutions. And as some of you may know, I'm a professor at UH Manoa's Richardson School of Law and the director of Kahuliao, our Native Hawaiian Law Center. I co-teach our Native Hawaiian and Environmental Law clinics, and since 2019, Tanigawa Love and I have had the great privilege of working with the Waioli Valley Tarahui on Kauai in navigating the water leasing process under HRS Chapter 171. Their situation is detailed in the Hui's written testimony, as well as the testimonies of 11 individual farmers upon which we stand. For those who are less familiar, the Hui is a collective of about a dozen small family farmers, many of whom are Native Hawaiian with long-standing ties to Waioli. Most are 3rd to 5th generation kalo farmers, and some were born on the farms that they now tend. In the wake of the 2018 floods that ravaged Kauai's North Shore and the Hui's farms in particular, they were informed that their traditional Native Hawaiian irrigation system that has been in place for centuries would now require either permitting or exemptions, including under HRS 171, because their ancient intake is on conservation land. So over the last 3 years, the farmers, with the assistance of our clinics, have been working very diligently to comply with all of 171's many requirements, including a right of entry and easement in IIFS amendment, consultation with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and FEA Afanzi, and more. And over many years, many students and attorneys and fellows have spent thousands of hours in support of this endeavor. Our students refer to the Hui as a legal unicorn because their situation and legal status are unique and warrant special treatment. Their stewardship of this area is ancient. It's been in place, before we had things like 171. Their use is so very pono, and I have to emphasize that they are public trust purposes because they have a pertinent riparian and traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights. Despite the many justice issues here, these humble farmers have dutifully sought to comply with the full letter of the law. We did not ask for this bill, but the farmers and I are grateful for it and we welcome it. And in particular, I want to mahalo the chair and the vice chair and other co-sponsors, such as Rep. Hirokawa, for recognizing the need and helping us to craft a solution. We have worked closely with Ian and others at DLNR, and they recognize how incredibly difficult this process is and the need for amendments. I would note that at the last hearing on this bill, DLNR supported the intent, but requested an amendment, and the Hui consulted with experts in Native Hawaiian and environmental law and collectively crafted language to address DLNR's request. That was not done in time for the Hui's testimony, but I submitted it in late testimony yesterday. So the main thing is we are here to say mahalo and please pass this bill. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mahalo, Professor Sproat. I appreciate your kind technical assistance through this whole drafting process and our legislative review. So mahalo to you and your students. Next, we have testimony and support from Joanne Kona. Please proceed. You have to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. Aloha,
No worries.
representatives. I'm Joanne Kona. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify. I'm here to ask that you humbly support. I'm humbly asking you to support HB 1768. I want to mahalo Representative Tarnas, Bronco, and Morikawa for introducing this bill and making this possible. I'm Secretary of the Waioli Valley Tarahui, and I help my dad, Clarence Shorty Kaona from Kalo in Waioli Valley. My dad's 86 and he still works in the Lo'i every day. He started when he was 6, and for us, farming Kalo defines our ohana, and it's how we contribute to our community. But for us, navigating the legal process of 171 has been a really big challenge for our Hui. When we decided to go for getting a water lease, we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We had no idea how complex and difficult it would be, but as a Hui, we wanted to set a precedence for Kalo farming and Kalo farmers across Hawaii. So Kapua Ui mapped us out a chart, and we're getting closer and closer with every semester that they've helped us. We definitely couldn't have done it without them. And we've had so much support along the way from representatives, the county, DLNR, DHHL, OHA. But after 4 years and all the help, we still don't have a water lease. So that's why this bill is important. And we would just want to continue this cultural practice, farming Kalo, and we think it shouldn't have to be this hard. So thank you for recognizing that, and please support HB 1768. Mahalo.
And we humbly say mahalo to you and your father and the entire Hui for all of your great work. Okay, let's move on. We have written testimony in support from Conrad Kimo Inanad, Clarence Shorty Kaona, whom we just heard from his daughter, Bobby Watari, Kason Carrillo, Dimitri Rivera, Dwight Morishige, Wayne Tanji, Sierra Lynn Stone, Kim Ku'ule Bernie with Papa Ola Lokahi, Kapono Chong Hansen with the Association of Native Hawaiian Physicians, and Frederick MJ Palau McDonald, Kimiona Kane, and we have a testimony in support from Chris Kobayashi. Chris Kobayashi, please proceed.
Aloha and good morning, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. My name is Chris Kobayashi, a third-generation kalo farmer in Waioli, and I'm also a member of Waioli Valley Tarahui. I am here today to ask for your strong support in passing HB 1768. And as you may know, it has been a long three years going on 4 now for us since the devastating April 2018 floods occurred, which forced our hui to start the process to get a formal water lease for continuing this centuries-old tradition and culture of lo'i kalo in Waioli, and which we still haven't gotten. I want to acknowledge those who have spent countless hours on our behalf to get to this point, and they are Kapua Sprode, Ui Tanigawa alum and their team of lawyers and clinicians. And as you can see, their commitment continues even now, and which, you know, our hui is really grateful for. So the enormous amount of time that they have spent doing the groundwork and continue to do is beyond what any regular person would be able to do, let alone a kalo farmer. This bill would directly benefit our Waioli Tarahui, but it would also open the way, I believe, for other kalo farmers across Hawaii who would be facing a similar daunting situation. So I want to thank Chair Tarnas for his vision, for your vision in drafting this bill to provide kalo farmers with an exemption from Chapter 171. And also mahalo to Representative Morikawa and Vice Chair Branco for signing on, and to the committee for listening to us today. So thank you. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Next, we have testimony in support from Uilani Tanigawa, Lum. Please proceed.
Aloha mai kako, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Uilani Tanigawa Lum, and I'm attorney and fellow at Kahuli'au Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law, where I have the honor of helping to teach Native Hawaiian and environmental law clinics. Mahalo nui for this opportunity to testify in strong support of this measure. You have my written testimony, but I'd like to briefly highlight here that I believe this measure takes steps to bring the Black letter law to life on the ground in our communities. It would provide much needed justice and kokua for hardworking kalo farmers like the Waioli Valley Tarahui. And as some of you may already know, I first met the hui in 2019 as a law student with Professor Sprode. And since then, my career as a young attorney has been shaped and inspired by their hard work, aloha, and unfortunately navigating this long 171-58 process. And while I'm grateful to know and work with these incredible folks, they shouldn't need a lawyer to be a farmer. I have seen firsthand, and the hui's 2021 final environmental assessment confirmed that the in-stream use of water for traditional and customary kalo cultivation, like the hui's, offers significant environmental benefits. And the analysis in the EA supports the idea that kalo farmers like those in Waioli actually improve the environment and provide crucial stewardship of Aina and its resources. So that said, I know you all have a busy day, so mahalo nui for your service and work for Collective Hawaii. And I'd like to also extend the mahalo to Chair Tarnas, and as well as the members of this important committee for your leadership and kokua on this issue. So I respectfully ask that you vote to pass this bill today. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo for your good work at the university. Appreciate it. Next, we have written testimony and support from a number of individuals: Lillian Watari, Ashley Kaono, Walter Riddy, Alexa Daiki, Chris Nunokawa, Lauren, Uilani, Stevens Nahiva, Penny Levin, and Maya Safari. Members, that is all the testimony we received on this measure. Does anyone have any questions for our testifiers?
Chair. Chair.
Yes. Please proceed, Representative Ganaden.
Maybe somebody from the William S. Richardson School of Law could answer this. Would this lease give a future community organization a right of action against, say, an upstream entity that is polluting the waterway? Would it give you standing?
And so thank you, Representative Ganadin. I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Are you asking with respect to the exemption that's being considered in the bill today, or a water lease more generally under HRS 171?
Water lease more generally, and then with this exception, broaden the ability of similarly situated organizations to sue?
Honestly, I don't think so. Even though the farmers, if this bill passes, would get an exemption from the 17158 water leasing requirements, they do have a right of entry and a perpetual easement through DLNR for their Munawai, because their traditional Native Hawaiian intake is on conservation land. So they do have a formal relationship already that's been recognized. In addition, many of them are downstream landowners or lessees, and so they would be similarly, they are impacted when things happen up Mauka, and that's part of why the Hui takes such an active role in stewarding not just their own land, but really the DLNR Aina as well, because they, and I would note too, the work that the Hui does, it benefits them individually and as a Hui, as Kala farmers, but it really benefits many throughout the Halale Akalana, as Hanalei town is Makai of their Lo'ikalo, and so they act as a very important flood retention basin in times of high water, which is something that happens all too frequently here in Halale'a.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your continued service to the community and education of students.
Thank you, Rep. Ganadin.
Thank you, Representative. Next, Representative Kobayashi, please proceed.
Good morning. For DLNR, DLNR suggests a one-sentence amendment to the bill. Is this sentence in addition to, or does it replace the sentence in subsection H in the bill?
I'm sorry, Representative. Yes, it is meant to replace the subsection H to provide more clarification. It's not the not an additional to the amendment.
Well, so in your testimony, DLNR testimony, you say something about commercial taro farmers should also be considered. Mm-hmm. But I don't see anywhere in either your amendment or elsewhere in the chapter how commercial taro farmers are defined and how they're different from so-called traditional farmers. And traditional is not defined anywhere.
Yeah, well, yes, that's why I think the goal of how we worded the amendment was, what's in the bill now refers to, I believe it's a reference to traditional and customary, and there's legal precedent that essentially excludes commercial uses from that. So we reworded it to say I think what we said was, I'm sorry, let me look at it here. For kalo cultivation done in a traditional manner. So it would cover not just subsistence farmers, but those who maybe sell part of what they cultivate or maybe make a living out of it. It was meant to sort of cast a wide net in terms of who would qualify, provided that they cultivate the kalo in a traditional manner. I think that's what we're trying to preserve here, is the practice, not so much, whether or not a farmer is selling or making a living from the practice. We want to strengthen the practice. So we just want to widen the net with how we worded the.
So you're saying that if the term traditional and customary practices were used, commercial farmers would be excluded, but somehow if you use the word traditional manner, then you capture commercial farmers? I don't get that.
Well, I think just because traditional and customary, and I think, like I said, it might be maybe just more a drafting issue, is that using those words together, I think there are implications beyond, like I said, there are legal precedent, a lot of legal precedent defining what that is. And we just didn't want to use those exact words. And I'm not sure if it would, but with the unintended effect of it, excluding someone or a farmer that really should be covered. So we wanted to just loosen it a little bit by saying in a traditional manner.
No, I
So,
understand
yeah,
what you're trying to get at or trying to do. But what I'm saying is that the words in the statute ideally should stand on its own and without a definition for traditional and without any mention of the word commercial taro farmers. I'm not sure that the amendment does what you intend to do.
Thank you, Representative. Any final
you.
comments, Mr. Hirokawa?
No, I understand I definitely understand the representative concerns. I think we need to probably think about how we would, if we were to change I guess what we propose. I think we just need to figure out how we're going to word it and how we're going to define things. Like if we say commercial, how we're going to define that, and specify the sort of type of cultivation done. So
thank you. Representative Kobayashi, did you have any further questions?
No, I mean, I think that somehow the bill should probably proceed forth and somebody should look into language more carefully.
Understood. Okay. Other members, questions? Representative Morikawa.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to hear from Kapua. What you think about that last question?
Thank you for that, Rep. Morikawa, and actually for your question as well, Representative Kobayashi. So at the last hearing on this bill, DLNR raised this issue, and while I wasn't sure that it was necessary to include the language, out of respect and to address their concern, over the weekend, I consulted with attorneys who litigate in this particular area, so who work on Native Hawaiian rights, environmental law, who have pursued issues under the water leasing process and Chapter 171, as well as representatives from the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And collectively, language was drafted to address DLNR specific concerns. And what I would propose is that in the place of, so if we look at page 6 of HB 1768 HD1, if you go with the language that's currently in the bill, and at the end, if you replace that period after traditional and customary kalo cultivation practices with a comma, you could easily just add, as well as commercial kalo cultivation conducted in a manner consistent with traditional and customary Native Hawaiian practices. And I believe, based on my work as well as my consultation with others in this area, that language would address the concern that DLNR has articulated. And I do want to point out that the language that DLNR has put forward for their amendment would only exempt kalo farmers from the public auction process. And so I really want to highlight for this committee that it's taken the Waiole Valley Taro Hui now almost 3 years with 33 students, 44 attorneys, over 2,000 hours just to get to this point before the public auction process. And so I do want to highlight that is still a significant hurdle for existing users, especially those with priority rights under the law. So mahalo for your attention to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Next, we have House Bill 1872 relating to sustainability. First up, we have Department of Land and Natural Resources, Ms. Marigold Zoll. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Thomas, Vice Chair Bronco, and committee members. I'm Marigold Zoll, Acting Administrator for the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. The department supports this measure and offers comments, and I'm available for questions with Laney Berry should the committee have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony in support from the County of Hawaii, Steve Bader, the Hawaii Forest Industry Association, Peter Simmons, Hawaii Sportsmen's Alliance, Tony Sylvester, National Wild Turkey Federation with John Sabati. Testimony in opposition with comments from Tom Lodge, Hawaii Hunting Association. Testimony in support from Soleil Roche, Joel Nakamoto, Sydney Ross Singer, Soma Grismeyer, Teresa Nakama, Michael Rice, and we have testimony support from Clayton Kubo. Mr. Kubo, are you with us today? No, he's not. So members, I refer you, oh, there he is. Go ahead, Mr. Kubo. Please proceed.
Hey, how's it going, Rep. Tornes? Yeah, I am very in support of this measure because basically, you know, it's a food source, yeah. If ever the budget stop coming to Hawaii, where are we going to get our food? And on top of all that, it is wild game, yeah. So, in a sense, food, sustainability. Thank you guys very much for letting me testify. Have a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Kubo. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Next, we have written testimony support from Brian Lay, Carl Mikasa, Daryl Tanaka, and we have testimony support from Nani Pogline. Nani, are you available?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Aloha, good morning. Thank you for hearing HB 1872. My name is Nani Pogline. I was a commissioner on the Hawaii County Game Management Advisory Commission for 6 years. For 2 years, I was chair. In the Hawaii revised statutes 183D, the DLNR is to preserve, protect, and promote public hunting. This was once one of the functions of the DLNR for the purpose of island food resource. Now, the main agenda seems to be the DLNR's agenda is preservation of native species, fencing and eradication of game animals, and no traditional game management plan. The reference to our wild game resources has become feral, ungulate, invasive, non-native species, creating species prejudice in the public by design. Our wild game resources are not undesirable rodents. They are free range, organic, delicious, nutritious, local food resource with no feed cost, no feedlot nor importation carbon footprint. In Bill HB 1721, requesting the joint effort of the DLNR and DOA to control feral animal population explosions with who knows what eradication method, with the DLNR testifying that hunters alone are not solving the problem. There's not enough creativity or positive ideas in problem solving for the benefit of the people. DLNR and DOA could create positive attitude toward our game resources, possibly by referring to them by their Hawaiian given names, Hoa'a, Ka'o, Hipa, Kia, with historical reference. Offering training programs for public hunting groups, certifying them to offer services to private landowners would be maybe possibly a creative idea. Offer education to the public, teaching humane hunting and trapping skills, slaughter techniques, safe butchering procedures, meat curing and preparation, and popular island recipes. Provide cage traps for rent for private landowners. Create a network of people who are interested in claiming trapped animals. Encourage codice industry, utilizing wild caught meat with user-friendly inspection sites. HB 1872, I feel, is a start to optimize our game resources and bring a beneficial balance to Hawaii. Please support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nani. Next, we have received written testimony and support from James O'Keefe, Stephen Kumasaka, Don Fujimoto, Mark Woodward, Hippolito Olais, Shelton Maderos, Bronston Casal, Brad Beck, Willie Joe Camara, Fred De Los Santos, and testimony and support from Todd Yukutake, Hawaii Firearms Coalition. Todd, please proceed.
Good morning, Water and Land Committee, Chair, Vice Chair, Todd Yukutake with Hawaii Firearms Coalition, and we support HB 1872. Hunting traditions run right alongside the right to keep and bear arms and are just as important. Our members depend on hunting to provide food for their families and friends, especially with the rising food prices now and inflation. Please pass this bill as good game management supports both hunters and the environment. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, sir. Members, that's all the testimony we have received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Representative Kobayashi, please proceed.
For DLNR, does this bill in any way change or limit what you can do or what anyone can do to deal with issues such as feral pigs, feral deer, feral chickens, etc.?
No, I don't think that it limits the ways in which we can partner with hunters to control feral animal populations. And I think that it provides a good background for us to expand our relationship with the hunting community in collaboration with farmers and other property owners. Yeah.
Okay, no, what I meant was the bill as written without DLNR suggested amendments. Would the bill as written limit what can be done to address the issues of feral pigs, feral chickens, feral deer?
In controlling their expanding populations, or?
Yeah, yes.
The bill is written. I'm sorry, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you, Ms. Zoll. Any other questions from members to our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Next, we have House Bill 1716 relating to land use. First up, we have testimony and support from the Land Use Commission. Mr. Dan Orendenker, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas, members of the committee. We're strongly in support of this measure. We think that it will resolve a number of issues and allow for better planning in the future for land use. The amendments that we propose would clarify the importance of this measure, add a few things that would assist the Land Use Commission as well. And we look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, Mr. Rodney Funokoshi. Please proceed.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The Office of Planning and Sustainable Development stands on its written testimony, offering comments and concerns, while noting that the proposed Conservation and Development Plan is duplicative of OPSD functions. We're also aware, however, of Land Use Commission testimony proposing amendments to the bill, which we would also like to comment on at this time. The Land Use Commission revisions propose to replace the review of districts provision in section 205-18. Please be informed that OPSD has recently completed and is in the process of transmitting our state land use review of districts report to the legislature, which you should be receiving sometime during the next week. This review of districts by OPSD should be retained regardless of the proposed Conservation and Development Plan. SB 1716 essentially proposes a new statewide land use plan. The Land Use Commission would prepare and adopt this conservation and development plan and then redistrict apparently through a legislative process. The Land Use Commission removes the redistricting through the legislative process, retaining the existing contested case format. The proposed revisions for the conservation and development plan essentially duplicate the issues already addressed by the counties in adopting their general plan and community development plans. These include desirable uses of land, population distribution, climate change, sea level rise, food, water, and energy, sustainability, cultural and environmental protection, and provision of housing opportunities. By including this new statewide plan as an added requirement for consideration in district boundary amendments and special permits, this bill will create an additional obstacle to develop housing and other developments. This will increase the cost of housing and other developments. However, should the committee and legislature believe this conservation and development plan is important to pursue and this bill moves forward, it would be preferable for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development as a state planning agency to prepare the plan, as the Land Use Commission is the decision-making body for district boundary amendments in determining conformance with the plan. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Representative Kobayashi.
For Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, are you going to propose an amendment to effectuate what you just said?
No, we do not have any amendments to propose.
I see. But you're essentially saying that your office should prepare the plan and then LUC should approve the plan. That is, review and approve. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily. We actually have concerns, overall concerns, with basically a duplicative function of this plan with not only Office of Planning's functions, but also the counties who go through an extensive process in adopting and considering their general plan, and then subsequently their community development plans, which go through basically the same process. So essentially, it is duplicative of these functions. So we actually do not see the need for the bill, and so would not be proposing amendments. But if the committee wishes to move it forward, our preference would be for Office of Planning and Sustainable Development to take the lead in preparation of the plan.
Okay. And also the counties in terms of their development plans. They would then prepare such a proposal for consideration and approval by LUC.
No, the counties are basically, they have their own process for consideration and adoption of the general plan and community development plans. The counties are, wholly entitled to zone and plan their urban district within the urban district. But they also take into consideration the entire context of their island and county in looking at agriculture, conservation, everything else, similar to what this bill provides.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any further questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Next, we have House Bill 1827 relating to the Pulehonui Community Development District. First up, we have testimony with comments from the Attorney General. Do we have a representative from the Attorney General with us today? Yes, Lori Sunakota, please proceed. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Branco, and members of the committee. Lori Sunakota, Deputy Attorney General, on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General. Our office submitted written comments to the committee expressing our legal concerns that the title of the bill may not reasonably cover the additional proposed amendments relating to the composition of the Hawaii Community Development Authority and to the nomination process involving HCDA board members based on Article 3, Section 14 of the Hawaii State Constitution, which provides that each law shall embrace but one subject, which shall be expressed in its title. To address this issue, in our comments, we included suggested revisions recommending deletion of the amendments relating to those additional subjects that do not appear to be embraced within the title of the bill. I'm available for any questions the committee members may have.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from William Isla, Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Chair Isla, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Bronco. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 1827. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Mr. Ian Hirokawa, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas. Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee. Ian Hirokawa with DLNR Land Division. We'll stand on our testimony supporting the intent of the measure and offering comments and be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in writing with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance and testimony in opposition in writing from the League of Women Voters of Hawaii, Doug Meller, and testimony in support from HCDA. Do we have a representative from HCDA here today? Yes, Craig Nakamoto, please proceed.
Morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee. Craig Nakamoto testifying on for Deepak Yupani and the Hawaii Community Development Authority. We submitted testimony in support, so I'll stand on our written testimony in support and just summarize really two comments that we have. One, kind of consistent with the Deputy Attorney General, Ms. Sunakota's comments, we have, because of the narrowness of the title, we have proposed in the markup and Ramsey version of the bill attached to the testimony, revised language to really narrow the contents of the bill to sort of align with the title. So that's comment, our first comment. The second comment, if you allow me to just provide oral testimony, it did not get into our testimony. As you know, one of the sources of funding for the public facilities in the district is a possible loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. One of their comments caused us to really want to provide clarifying comments as to the powers of the Pulehonui Community Development District Board. So if I may offer short language on that, on page 4, line 1 of the Ramsey version of the bill, after the parenthetical B, but before the phrase "in addition," we would suggest adding the following language: the powers granted to the authority under this chapter shall be granted to the Pulehonui Community Development District Board, period. And then continue with the rest of that sort of sentence, in addition and supplemental. And if the chair prefers, I can maybe put that language in the chat room or something if it's clear. But I apologize for the late addition to the testimony. We just got comments very late last week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members,
thank you, Chair.
Anything further, Mr. Nakamoto? No, you're all set. Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Nakamoto. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? If not, I think we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers on this measure. Very helpful. Okay, let's move on now, members, to House Bill 2165. This is an administration measure relating to disposition of public lands by negotiation. First up, we have testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. Russell Tsuji, please proceed.
Yeah. Good morning, Chair. Russell Tsuji for the department, members of the committee. We support this administrative measure and we thank you for hearing this bill. We do note that it is a little longer term than one was recommended by the House Investigative Committee, which was, I think, was limited to 5 or 10 year directly negotiated leases. We believe, after consulting with our real estate consultant, that lessees who are expected to make substantial improvements to property probably will need a term of 35 years. And so we limit the term to 35 years. The rent, of course, will be determined by appraisal and it'll be fair market value. I'm available for any questions you may have, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from the Kupuna for the Mo'opuna. Testimony in opposition from Sierra Club of Hawaii, Mr. Wayne Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Wayne Tanaka. We oppose this measure for the reasons outlined in the written testimony. I just add that, the lands subject to this bill are the most lucrative lands in the DLNR's inventory. And so these lands will be the most susceptible to political and economic pressure on the part of lessees to negotiate some leases that are favorable to them, but not as favorable to the public or the DLNR. And the public auction process is what puts up a shield against this kind of pressure to prevent it leading to 55, 65-year leases that don't provide sufficient revenues for the DLNR's mission. So we'd ask that before you give this kind of broad authority to the DLNR to maybe impose other guardrails, requirements to prevent potentially locking in our most lucrative lands for generations at a time under leases that are not favorable to the public or the DLNR. I'm so sorry, I have to jump to another meeting, but I'm happy to answer any questions after the.
Thank you very much for being in 2 places at once. Next, we have testimony in opposition from the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, from Pono Hawaii Initiative. These are all written comments in opposition. From Jasmine Cavanilla, from Kuhio Lewis, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, from Ann Frederick, Bridget Bales, Nako'o Warrington, Diane Ware. We also have testimony in opposition from Mialisa Otis. Is Ms. Otis available? No? Mialisa Otis.
Here, starting video.
Please proceed. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mialisa Otis, and I oppose HB 2165 and its companion bill SB 3133. HB 2165 is about stopping the auction process and letting government entities sell public lands directly to developers without going through the auction process. Being from Waimanalo, I want to share how this affects our community. The National Register of Historic Places is behind me. Oh, sorry, you didn't see my video. Here we go. And this could potentially desecrate iwi and sacred spaces around the island. The city bought Hunananiho or Sherwoods through the auction. Without that process, that area would be developed. As Bellows prepares to hand over land, we don't want Bellows selling that land to new land developers. We know there are hungry investors out there ready to eat up Waimanalo. Our infrastructure cannot support the development. This corruption goes hand in hand with HB 1750, which exempts developers from EIS and EA requirements. HB 2165 reduces oversight and accountability. We are in an atmosphere of corruption, including in the House and Senate. The land cannot be the victims, and we will be the land's voices. We do not want anything right now to make it easier for developers to skip over the established processes. Please kill this bill. Mahalo.
Mahalo for your testimony. Next, we have testimony from Kanela Kamahalo Hanuilai. Is Kanela available? Don't see Kanela today, so I refer you to, members, I refer you to his written testimony. Next, we have written testimony in opposition from numerous individuals, including Namaka, Nana Honua Manuela, Jennifer Noelani Ahia, Shard Freitas, Laura Ramirez, and Sherry Pollack. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you very much for that. Actually, I do have a question for DLNR. Mr. Tsuji, in the investigative committee, I know we talked about the idea of allowing DLNR to do direct negotiations, but I think the committee really in the discussion was really focusing on, you got to see if there's interest first by doing like a request for interest before being allowed to go into direct negotiations. Have you thought further about that in your, sort of trying to figure out a path forward on this matter?
I think we would be open to entertaining, an amendment to the measure if that was the committee's prerogative. We're trying to just do this, submit this bill very simply under the existing direct negotiation statute already available for aeronautical, maritime, agriculture, aquaculture operations. So we're just adding in the commercial and industrial. We think if the committee is inclined to add in that RFI, I think the department, as we stated in our investigative committee hearings, that we'll be open to that suggestion. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Kobayashi.
Hello, good morning. For DLNR, do you have to, I'm wondering if you should define what you mean by commercial and industrial. Or is commercial and industrial already defined in Chapter 171?
It is certainly used in 171. In other places in 171, I don't know if it's so much defined. We've basically allowed commercial. We have commercial leases currently and industrial leases. We have an inventory of those throughout the state. And there are businesses, industrial businesses. Some are in industrial parks out at Sand Island or in Kona, where we have an industrial area. And then some are businesses such as HPM is a tenant, is like it's very close to City Mill type of operation, right?
No, what I mean is that I'm not sure what these terms mean. Commercial to me could be any variety of commercial, from a store selling virtually anything to a hotel.
A hotel we have listed specifically as a hotel or a resort.
Right,
Yeah,
but commercial covers everything.
It is broad, yeah.
Including a hotel.
Yes, it is broad.
Thank you for your question and your response. Any further questions, Representative Kobayashi? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Tsuji. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you to our testifiers on this important measure. Next, we're moving on to House Bill 2417, relating to public lands. This is actually a bill written requesting DLNR to follow up on the report of the House Investigative Committee on looking at the audit of the Special Land and Development Fund. And so first up, we have testimony from DLNR in support. Mr. Ian Hirokawa, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Ian Hirokawa with DLNR Land Division. We'll stand on our testimony in support of the measure and be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've received written comments from Department of Budget and Finance and from Mr. James McCulley. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Questions for our testifier? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Actually, maybe I should say something to DLNR. There's this bill was written basically to follow up on the key recommendations in the investigative committee, but there were a number of other matters that were in discussion that we had extensive discussions on. And so when we get to decision making, I will be proposing additional amendments to it listing some of the other items that I think the investigative committee would be interested in having you follow up on. But that's the context for my recommended amendments when we get to that point in decision making. So I don't have any questions for you now. I think you've already responded. Mr. Tsuji responded about the RFI, for example. And I'll follow up in decision making with the other items that we'd like you to look into. Basically just following up on some of the discussions from in the investigative committee.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, any further questions on this measure? Seeing none, let's move on. Okay, next is House Bill 1657 relating to leases. Now, this measure and the following 1658, 1659, and 1660 are 4 measures that we have proposed to follow up on the recommendations, findings and conclusions and recommendations of the Act 90 working group that worked over the interim as well. And so first up, we'll be discussing the Bill 1657 relating to leases. And this first up, we have DLNR with comments. Mr. Kevin Moore, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Kevin Moore with DLNR Land Division. The department will stand on its written testimony in support of the measure, and we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from Micah Munakata, Ulufono Initiative. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Micah Munakata on behalf of the Ulufono Initiative. We'll stand on our testimony offering comments. We have a couple of recommended changes towards the end of our testimony, just looking to clarify what a funded action plan looks like. Potentially adding some of those requirements in statute might be beneficial to further define what that could be. And then also looking to add around the approval process that you would include the Board of Agriculture, as they are the entity that really deals with agricultural operations here within the state. It would be important to include them on that decision to pull out agricultural production for reforestation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony in opposition from Lonnie Petrie of Kapapala Ranch. The testimony submitted with comments from Nicole Galassi, Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. Nicole, please proceed.
Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on these bills. I'm Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We appreciate the work of the Act 90 working group to try to get to the root of the issue. And we stand on our testimony offering comments, as although this has the potential to offer a layer of protection to prevent lands from being removed from pasture without a plan, it is worrisome to be putting into law that lands in active agriculture could be withdrawn and converted to reforestation. At the moment, any land lease can be withdrawn with reasonable notice and compensation, but this bill would require that a funded plan that is approved be approved, and that's an improvement. Though we agree with Ulufono's suggestions for amendments for clarification. Cattlemen are not against forests, but the number of acres in pasture are diminishing, with the 2015 and 2020 baseline censuses showing a continual downward trend. According to the Hawaii Data Book, there are 48% of Hawaii state lands designated as conservation. We know that this 48% of lands are not yet fully managed for conservation and believe that these should be the areas that are looked at for reforestation, rather than considering taking lands out of active agriculture. For this reason, we suggest that the Department of Ag also be required to approve the funded plan for any removal of pasture for reforestation, as they will be the voice for ensuring agriculture is not negatively impacted by any such actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Brian Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Before I begin my testimony, I'd also like to thank you, Chair Tarnas, and the Act 90 working group for all the work that you've done to help facilitate this process. We know it's been a long time, 19 years, so we do appreciate a lot of work was done over the interim. And our thanks are for the following, the next 3 bills also. You do have our written testimony, which provides comments. We do have a few friendly suggested amendments similar to Ulufono and the Cattlemen, basically adding the Board of Agriculture for the approval of the withdrawal. Again, rely on their expertise in agriculture, and we do request these simple amendments to the bill. But again, Chair Tarnas, Act 90 Working Group, thank you for all the work along.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Peter Simmons. Mr. Simmons, are you available? It does not appear so. Members, I refer you to Mr. Simmons' written testimony for his input. And finally, we have written testimony in opposition from Teresa Thompson. Members, that's all the testimony we received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Next, we have House Bill 1658 relating to the transfer of non-agricultural park lands. First up, we have testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. Kevin Moore, please proceed.
Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Yeah, the department supports this measure. We did have a suggested amendment. The bill uses the term easements by necessity, which we believe could be construed in its technical legal sense, which is narrower than I think the bill's intent. So we would just recommend striking by necessity after the word easements in the bill. And we're available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from Micah Munakata, Ulufono Initiative. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Micah Munakata on behalf of Ulufono Initiative. Again, for this bill, we are supporting the intent. We do have a recommended amendment towards the end of our testimony, again, adding the word reasonable to before easements. Again, the idea is to ensure that these lands are utilized in the right way, really, for the entire state. And, although we think that some of this collaboration already occurs between DLNR and DOA, we are supportive of, putting this in statute. Appreciate all your work, Chair, on the Act 90 Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Land Use Research Foundation, David Arakawa. And we have testimony in opposition in writing from Lonnie Petrie of Kapapala Ranch. Next, we have testimony and support from Nicole Galassi, Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. Nicole, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We stand on our written testimony and support with the amendment that any easements made be reasonable, as easements can be widely interpreted. We are supportive of DOA inquiring about these easements and encourage the departments to work together to find the best path forward for both of their missions. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Next, we have testimony and support from Kendall Matsuyoshi, Local Food Coalition. Mr. Matsuyoshi, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, and members of the committee. Kendall Matsuyoshi on behalf of the Local Food Coalition. We'll stand on our testimony supporting the intent of the measure and agree with the amendment proposed by Ulufono and the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. And we'd also like to thank the Act 90 Working Group for their work over the interim to help facilitate this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have testimony and support from Brian Miyamoto with Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We do support this measure. We do, again, have a friendly amendment. We heard the different testifiers. We believe ours will provide some clarity. So we're asking that by necessity, as DLNR asked, be stricken, and instead we add necessary and reasonable easements. I think you heard a combination from the previous testifiers, but we do believe that it'll provide some clarity for this provision. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to our testifiers. Next, we have House Bill 1659 relating to land leases. And first up, we have DLNR. Mr. Kevin Moore, please proceed.
Good morning again. The department stands on its written testimony in strong support of this measure, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony with comments from Micah Munakata. Micah, please proceed.
Thank you again, Chair. Ulufono will stand on its testimony offering comments. Main comment here is that this bill seems to develop a little bit more capacity within DLNR to address agricultural leases in the way that DOA already does it. And from our perspective, this tends to kick the can down the road a little bit more. We'd like to see active agricultural production come into a lease structure that's beneficial now. I think we've come into a situation, especially recently, around some of the food security issues that we experience across the state, and really trying to support agriculture and sustainability. And I think that, if we're serious about that, we should look to implement some change in the fastest way and most efficient way possible. And we believe that is through the Department of Agriculture. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony with comments from Nicole Galassi, Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. Nicole, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole Galassi on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. I wanted to highlight that we're not in opposition of DLNR being able to be authorized to do these things for these leases, but we don't want it to be an excuse to no longer transfer lands to DOA pursuant to Act 90. We really believe that a more effective and immediate relief for these ag leases under DLNR are to be transferred to DOA, where they can get these lease terms and support for continuing ag production. And that's where DLNR can collaborate with DOA to ensure that their needs are met. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have testimony in opposition in writing from Lonnie Petrie, Kapapala Ranch. And we have testimony with comments from Brian Miyamoto, Hawaii Farm Bureau. Mr. Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written comments in front of you. We do appreciate the intent of the measure, again, to support our farming and ranching industry. However, we don't believe that if this measure passed, it would compel DLNR to offer those leases. Again, we advocate for the transfer of the lands over to the Department of Agriculture. We believe they're the agency that's suited to manage these leases. So we do stand on our written testimony providing comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you to our testifiers. Next is a final bill on our agenda today, House Bill 1660, relating to land. First up, we have written comments from the Department of Budget and Finance, and we have testimony and support from DLNR. Mr. Kevin Moore, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Kevin Moore, DLNR Land Division. The department will stand on its written testimony in support and proposing an amendment. The bill would create a new position and put it in Land Division, but after discussion with Division of Forestry and Wildlife, we believe the duties of the position fit better with DOFA, and so we would ask for an amendment that houses the new position there. And we believe the funding level for this would be about an SR 24 up to step H position. So we didn't include that detail in our testimony, but would like to add it if we could. We're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Micah Munakata, Ulufono Initiative. Please proceed.
Chair, thank you again. Ulufono will stand on its testimony respectfully opposing this measure. Similar to the last testimony, we do think that there's an appropriate agency for these types of leases. There's some concerns around the definition of multi-use. I think that it's pretty vague in statute or in this bill. So looking to clarify what that would be, but in reality, sending these active agricultural production lands into DLNR is something that we feel is more appropriate within the Department of Agriculture, where their expertise lies in agriculture. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've received written testimony in opposition from the Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii, David Arakawa. And we have testimony in opposition from the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, Nicole Galassi. Please proceed, Ms. Galassi.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole Galassi again on behalf of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. Again, we're grateful for the Act 90 working group, spending the time and the effort to meet and hear from leaseholders and the departments. However, we stand on our written testimony in opposition of HB 1660. Maintaining that multi-use land stay with DLNR does disincentivize ranchers from engaging in conservation activities. These are things they would normally do and pursue as part of their operations. Many of these lands that have conservation or public use or as access aspects to them still primarily work as agricultural operations. And they need the support of a state department that understands ag production and prioritizes it. That's the Department of Agriculture. DLNR's mission to conserve and protect natural and cultural resources is important, but Hawaii has seen that we need to increase our food security. And ranchers are prepared to contribute to that if they have the confidence that they can increase production prudently and under the right conditions. And that's under the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have written testimony in opposition from Kapapala Ranch, Lonnie Petrie. Also from Jimmy Gomes. And testimony in opposition from Kendall Matsuyoshi, Local Food Coalition. Kendall, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Bronco, members of the committee, Kendall Matsuyoshi on behalf of the Local Food Coalition. We will stand on our testimony respectfully opposing the measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from the Hawaii Farm Bureau, Brian Miyamoto. Mr. Miyamoto, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We will also stand on our testimony respectfully opposing this measure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have written testimony in opposition from Alan Gottlieb from the Punaholo Ranch Limited. Members, that's all the testimony we've received on this measure. Any questions for our testifiers? I have a question, if there are no questions from other members, I have a question for Nicole Galassi in the Cattlemen's Council. In your testimony, you say that if land is retained, at least these pastoral land leases are retained within DLNR and managed for multiple management objectives, which include agricultural production, but also reforestation or other ecosystem services. I'm trying to understand how there would be a disincentive for ranchers to engage in various conservation measures that they would do anyway, you know, that NRCS and their soil conservation plans would recommend. Why would there be a disincentive to do that if the land lease remains within DLNR?
Thanks for that question. I think that has to do with the definition of multi-use and kind of clarifying that. If these lands are in agriculture, then a lot of these lands in agriculture are primarily for food production. They do these conservation practices as a supplement to what they're doing. They may get the idea that if they do these conservation actions, then they'll be pegged as multi-use and won't be able to transfer to Department of Agriculture. And that's why we think it's a disincentivization. We are currently looking at grants right now through NRCS to help our ranchers to improve their ecosystem services that they can provide. But when we reach out to them, a bill like this makes them think, well, if I do more conservation practices, will that classify me as a multi-use lease instead of just agriculture? So that's where our worry is.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Members, any other questions for our testifiers? Representative Kobayashi.
Hi, morning for DLNR. I'm looking at HRS 171-10 about classification of lands. How would you classify a land as multi-use agriculture?
So we also have people from our Division of Forestry and Wildlife on the line here, so they may want to chime in, but it's basically going to, one, look at what the disposition is for the land. So if we have a lease for pasture or some type of agricultural use, that will establish the agricultural aspect. But if there are endangered species, plants or birds, or reforestation potential on the land, we would have to very closely consult with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife to, have that aspect of it determined. And if we had two or more of those different uses on a piece of property, it would probably fall into this multi-use category.
Oh, I see what you mean. So, you would say that the term multi-use has to do with the classifications that are enumerated by number. That is, number one, intensive agricultural use. Number two, special livestock use. Number three, pasture use, etc.
Right.
Okay. That's not clear, I think. Probably the term multi-use should be defined. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Thank you, Kevin Moore. Any other questions, members? Before going on, I want to note that there are other written testifiers or written testimony received from the following testifiers, all in opposition: Bobby Farias, Frank Vandersloot, Woody Child, Alex Franco, Keith Unger, and Teresa Thompson, all providing written testimony in opposition to HB 1660. Okay, members, any additional questions, any further questions for our testifiers? I guess that's it. Then there being no further testifiers on any of these measures and no further questions, I'd like to move directly into decision making. Members, if you would go back up to the top of the agenda. First up, we have House Bill 1768. My recommendation is to pass out a House Draft 2 and adopt the amendments from Professor Sproat as she described on page 6, after the new language, after practices, put a comma, and then the words "as well as commercial kalo cultivation conducted in a manner consistent with traditional and customary Native Hawaiian practices," and period, end quote. So that would be my recommendation. Members, any questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, HB 1768 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1768 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ganadin?
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi?
Aye.
Representative Kong is excused. Representative Morikawa?
Aye.
Representative Ono is excused, as well as Representative McDermott. The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, House Bill 1872. I'd like to pass this out with the House Draft 1. We should defect the effective date and incorporate the amendments as recommended by DLNR. Members, that's my recommendation. Any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, 1872 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1872, noting the excused absence of Representative Kong, Ono, McDermott for this measure and all future measures. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, House Bill 1716. This is an innovative bill, a novel idea. I think it's worth continued discussion. But when I spoke with the introducer of the bill, having read the testimony, he said it's best idea for us to defer the measure and have him work with the two agencies to figure out a path forward so that we don't try to do this in short order here during the session. So with that in mind, my recommendation is to defer. Any comments or questions or discussion, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. House Bill 1827, relating to the Pulehonui Community Development District. Members, my recommendation is to pass out a House Draft 1, defect the effective date to July 1, 2050, make technical amendments, and adopt the recommended amendments from HCDA. Members, that's my recommendation. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote on HB 1827 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1827 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, on to House Bill 2165, relating to disposition of public lands by negotiation. This is a matter that we had discussed in the investigative committee, and I think I would rather have this issue dealt with under that bill rather than passing this bill. My recommendation is to defer this measure. I'll note that the Senate companion bill, Senate Bill 3133, is moving in the Senate. If it comes over, we can look at this again. But I do think we need to look at some guardrails on this authorization to DLNR for going to direct negotiation for leases for commercial, industrial, and hotel or resort purposes. So this bill, I think, while it was very simple and fit into the statute, I think we require a more nuanced approach that would have some additional guardrails. I mentioned the RFI, for example, as one, and I think Rep. Kobayashi was inquiring about definitions. So this needs more work. So my recommendation is defer. Questions, comments, members? Seeing none, moving on. House Bill 2417, relating to public lands. On this measure, this is one that we had basically asked DLNR to follow up on the recommendations of the House Investigative Committee. And what I'd like to do is, as I'm recommending that we pass out a House Draft 1, and that it would change the effective date to July 1, 2050, make some technical amendments, and add some language basically asking DLNR to follow up on some of the discussion that we had in our investigative committee. I'd like DLNR to do two things. One, conduct a policy analysis considering state land lease policy, as well as what's in the bill now, which is to develop proposed legislation based on our report's recommendation. I'd like DLNR to produce a report to the legislature, which includes analysis, findings, and recommendations on, as I said, a policy analysis considering state land lease policy. The report could include expert analysis from University of Hawaii, including the Kahuli'au Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law, and a national organization of state legislatures, and comparison with best practices in comparable states. And the study should include an analysis of, one, the conditions under which lease extensions are in the best interests of the state, including both monetary and non-monetary costs and benefits associated with extending a lease, and with the lease reverting back to the state for lease reopening. I'd like to get this analysis so that the legislature can make some informed choices on this. Second, I'd like the study to include an analysis of the costs and revenue estimates for the state to offer space leases rather than just ground leases. Third, I'd like DLNR to conduct an analysis of potential statutory or procedural improvements which would allow DLNR to derive just compensation, fines, fees, etc., from lessees when lessees fail to maintain the parcel and or complete the improvements that were promised as a condition of the extension, including any proposed legislation. So those would be the additional things I'd like the DLNR to address. And then finally, I'd like to, on page 2, line 5, delete the words "except any improvement mandated by the state" so that it's consistent with the language in the final report. And technical and non-substantive amendments to ensure that it reads properly. Sorry for the lengthy discussion, lengthy description, but that would be my recommendation. But again, it's just to implement the, have DLNR follow up on the discussion that we had in the investigative committee on all of these important matters. Members, any questions, any discussion on my recommendation? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote on HB 2417 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 2417 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Next, on to the bills that relate to the Act 90 working group. And I appreciate everyone's work on the Act 90 working group over the interim and our efforts to try to address this issue going forward. I'd like to preface my recommendations on these 4 bills by noting that Act 90 directs DLNR and DOA to evaluate lands that are currently under pastoral leases, and by mutual agreement of DLNR Board of Land and Natural Resources and the Board of Agriculture, transfer the lands. It does not mandate all pastoral land leases to be transferred from DLNR to DOA without question. It requires the mutual agreement of both the Board of Ag and the Board of Land and Natural Resources. And as we found in our discussions over the interim with the Act 90 working group, there are leased lands that are managed by DLNR that are leased for pastoral purposes, which is agriculture. But DLNR also has other management objectives for that same parcel, that same lease. And so that's what we were trying to attempt in these legislation, is to improve the capacity of DLNR to manage lands that have multiple management objectives, including production ag. Because if the Board of Land and Natural Resources does not want to transfer these lands over to the Department of Ag, it's not going to happen. Act 90 was very clear on that. And so we're trying to implement Act 90, and we're trying to assist the agencies to do their job better. With that in mind, I'd like to move forward and recommend on HB 1657 to pass out a House Draft 1 merely by defecting the effective date to July 1, 2050. Members, any questions, any discussion? Representative Kobayashi.
What about the suggestion to have the Board of Ag approve withdrawal?
Thank you for asking. My inclination is not to include that, because these are lands that are managed by DLNR. To require another agency's decision-making board to make a determination for lands under DLNR seems overly cumbersome. And I think I'd rather have, as I've tried in another bill, increase the capacity of DLNR to actually do good agriculture management, as opposed to having the board get involved, the Board of Ag get involved in DLNR decision-making. So that's why I chose not to include that recommendation.
Okay.
Any other questions, discussion, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, 1657 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1657 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, House Bill 1658. I'd like to recommend we pass out a House Draft 1, defect the effective date, July 1, 2050, and incorporate the suggested amendment from the Hawaii Farm Bureau, which is very similar to other recommendations from other testifiers, but it basically deletes the word "by necessity" after the word "easement" and adds the words "necessary and reasonable" before the word "easements." And that's in the testimony from the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Members, that's my recommendation. Any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, HB 1658 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1658 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you. Next, House Bill 1659. This is part of recommendation to improve the capacity of DLNR to manage their lands properly for agricultural production and other management objectives by giving them additional authority, so that they could negotiate and work with the lessees in order to have leases and the terms that would actually help these operations to succeed in their agricultural enterprise. So with that in mind, I'd like to recommend moving HB 1659 forward with a House Draft 1 merely by defecting the effective date to July 1, 2050. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, 1659 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1659 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much. Finally, the last measure on our agenda, House Bill 1660. My recommendation is to move out of House Draft 1, defect the effective date to July 1, 2050, adopt the recommended amendment from DLNR, so the position would be in DOFA rather than land division. I'm not quite ready to add any definition to multi-use lands, but I could work on this before now on the next committee. But because of timing, I would like to move this bill on with only the recommended amendments I've suggested. Defect the effective date and incorporate the amendment from DLNR to put the position in DOFA rather than land division. That's my recommendation. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, HB 1660 with amendments.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass House Bill number 1660 with amendments. Is there any reservations? Any no votes? The measure passes.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much to the testifiers. We still have a long way to go on a number of these measures, and I appreciate all of your collaborative effort to try to solve this challenging issue that relates to public land leasing. So with that said, there being no further business before this committee today, we are adjourned.